issues, but we're going to dive in. I am Zoya Patel. I'd like to acknowledge that we are broadcasting on stolen lands tonight. We're broadcasting from the stolen lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, as well as the Ngunnawal people. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to any First Nations people tuning in tonight. It would be great if you also took a moment to stop and acknowledge the lands that you're on and that you're tuning in from, and acknowledge elders past, present, and future on those lands as well. It was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. So first of all, sorry we're running a little bit late. As always happens in the amazing wide world of the internet, things do go wrong with technology, but it's all working now, and hopefully you can hear us loud and clear. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of background. Hopefully you already know about how awesome Express Media is. It is a vital organisation. It's absolutely essential to the literary arts and broader communities, and especially for young people. It's acknowledged and valued as a peak organisation for young Australian writers aged 12 to 30, which means that I have until the end of this year to continue benefiting from all of the awesome work that Express Media does as a participant, but hopefully we'll continue to be able to contribute as a older and hopefully wiser and more learned person. For the past 30 years, Express Media has been developing and supporting and promoting young writers through workshops that develop skills, through opportunities for constructive feedback and publication, and through awards and programs that recognise excellence. One of these programs is Toolkits. I'm sorry for clearing my throat. I've been a little bit sick, so I keep getting a frog. Toolkits is a rigorous 12-week program for writers aged 30 and under to develop their skills in unique and exciting online environments. Each program includes one-on-one mentoring and feedback from an established writer. It specialises, we also have specialised presentations from guest artists like tonight, and the opportunity to network with other young people working in the same literary form. I'm really lucky to be facilitating the Memoir Toolkits this year, and it's been fantastic, and I'm super excited to be joined by Carly tonight. There is Carly. It feels so strange, Carly, to not be actually like sitting face to face with you. But as soon as I finish reading this next little bit, I'll finally be able to like gaze into your eyes, which I'm looking forward to. So Toolkits is made possible through the generous support of the Copyright Agency Cultural Fund, which is awesome. And these live sessions are presented by Express Media in partnership with Regional Arts Victoria as part of the Arts Connect series, which is funded by the federal government's Regional Arts Fund. That is not an easy funding acknowledgement to say, but I hope you caught all of that. So this is our first Toolkits live session of 2019. Isn't that awesome? How are you feeling, Carly, about being part of it? That is awesome. I'll just do a little quick intro of both of us, and then we can dive into the conversation. So for those who don't know me, I am Zoya Patel. I'm a writer and editor based in Canberra. I published a debut memoir last year called No Country Woman. I feel like I should get a copy of it and wave it around. Maybe I'll do that later. That was a book about race, religion, and feminism. It came out through Hachette. And I guess that's what qualifies me to be running Toolkit's memoir this time around. So I'm the facilitator for Toolkit's memoir. We've been doing a lot of talking about kind of ethics in memoir and roadblocks, and you know the difficulties of kind of writing personal life while also still living it. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. I'm particularly excited to be having it with Carly Findlay, who I consider a friend and a writer that I look up to. Carly is an award-winning writer, speaker, and appearance activist. Her first book, which has just come out in January, is called Say Hello. She is also working on editing Growing Up Disabled in Australia with Black Ink books. She writes on disability and appearance diversity issues for news outlets, including the ABC, The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, and SBS. She was named one of Australia's most influential women in the 2014 Australian Financial Review and Westpac 100 Women of Influence Awards. And surely that influence has only skyrocketed since 2014. She's also appeared on ABC TV's You Can't Ask That and Cyber Hate with Tara Moss. Has been a regular on various ABC radio programs. She's spoken at the Melbourne Writers' Festival, the University of West England, and Melbourne Uni, to name just a few. She organised the History Making Access to Fashion, which was a Melbourne Fashion Week event, which featured disabled models. She has a Master's of Communication and Bachelor of E-Commerce, and she identifies as a proud disabled woman. She lives with a rare, severe skin condition called ichthyosis, Have I pronounced that right, Carly? Oh, awesome. She also co-hosts a funny podcast called Refreshments Provided that could do with a few more listeners. So I think we can all rush off and subscribe to that after this. So Carly is joining us to talk about Say Hello, and also her mission to empower other people with disabilities through her own story and what the real life implications are of representing a community. I mean, I'm sure, Carly, you already have thoughts and feelings about the language that I just used then even. So while we're having this conversation, remember that you can ask questions by tweeting them to Express Media. The handle is express__media with the hashtag EM Toolkits. Have a look on Twitter. Please join the conversation. But I am going to dive right in. First of all, Carly, thank you so much for doing this. I'm dying to know, how are you feeling right now? It must have been a total whirlwind over the past few months, just having the book out and promoting it. What are you feeling at the moment? Oh, wow. That's so funny. Your stage is the internet tonight. It's a little bit different. Does it feel strange at all? I mean, I know when I had my memoir come out and I was doing the publicity trail, and you're kind of in this dual zone where your life has been split into kind of ordinary moments where you just get to be like Carly or Zoya living your life, and then these moments where you're just thrust into totally different spaces with a lot of publicity. And because you've written memoir, people feel like they know you in a way that, like, I certainly wasn't prepared for. You've been writing about your own life and your own experiences for a much longer time, though. Has that changed with the book being out? Does that change that kind of relationship at all?
There's nothing on the screen.
Yeah,
so.
we are. The voice, you're not hearing it quite right.
Hang on 1 second. I'm just going to stop, and then I'll start talking when we've heard the voice.
I think we're going to leave it like that.
Is that okay? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you perfectly.
Can you see me okay?
I can see you in a little screen, but I can't see you in a big screen.
Bear with me 1 moment. Sorry, everyone.
That's all right.
Sorry, there's just some technical difficulties.
Oh, man.
This is good. It's building the suspense. It's kind of like breaking down the fourth wall, and we all get to see what happens behind the scenes.
Okay. That's
awkward. It'll be fine. And then, okay, I think it should be fine.
Can you see me now? Or
I
can you just see like
you now. No, now there's just kind of like an icon on the screen.
We're going to use this then as a camera.
We can see you now.
I'm going to move this here.
Yeah.
Hang on 1 second.
That's perfect. I can see you perfectly now.
I'm going to off, so perfect. Is that okay now? Can
That's
you
perfect.
see me?
Yeah, we can see you perfectly well.
We're going to use this?
No, not the microphone.
No?
No, that's good. We can hear Carly and see Carly now.
Okay. All right, great. All right. So I'm going to start again. The feeling of being, kind of that dual life. Well, I used to work for the government, and when I worked for the government, I couldn't write about anything about the government, even though it wasn't to do, like, what my topic is disability, even though it wasn't to do with the department I worked for. I wasn't allowed to write anything for the government about the government. So I also had to tell the government when I was in the media. And so I would lead this really dual life because, the hierarchy of it all, I'd be, sometimes the top news story on Fairfax's news sites, so the Sydney Morning Herald or The Age, and at work, allowed to have an opinion. That was really hard. So I've been used to this dual life for a little while, but now I work in the arts. I work for Melbourne Fringe, and I work there 2.5 days a week. And so they're super supportive of what I do inside and outside of work. But what I have found is now I'm allowed to talk about it. Every conversation now is, oh, how's your book? And I'm a bit bored by that question. When
I know. I find it actually really challenging when people ask me how the book's going, especially now. So I'm kind of 6 months, a bit over 6 months in, and people will be like, how are sales going? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't want to know how sales are going. That's a horrifying question to me. Can we please just focus on, like, that, you know, I know what the book achieved, I feel comfortable with that, but I don't want to talk about it all the time because it actually does produce a bit of anxiety. Like, do you feel like that's heightened when you are writing about yourself versus when you're reporting kind of from a more journalistic perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. There's that vulnerability. But I also think that I was really prepared for like hate mail, and I was prepared for trolling, and I was prepared for really nasty things. And while there has been a few things, like some negative reviews on Goodreads, there hasn't overall. It's been amazing. You know, every day I get an email or message to say my books helped them or made them think in a different way or changed their life. I wasn't prepared for the love, you know, and that's been
absolutely
really lovely. I just wasn't prepared for that love. I wasn't prepared for the good. But even that isn't overwhelming. There's a lot happening in my life at the moment, in my personal life, that I don't often talk about online. And one of the things that I'm finding is even the good stuff is overwhelming with, you know, working so much online. I get tagged in everything, but I just really want to. One of the other things that's really challenging I'm finding is the amount of questions about, like, how do I buy a ticket to your event, or it's sold out, or how do I buy your...
No. It's like that meme that you want to send people that's like, let me just Google that for you, because you know, they mean really well and they're trying to demonstrate the support, but they're actually kind of adding to your mental load.
I think that
and like, you just don't have any to spare.
Yeah, people, it's hard managing that, because you want to sell tickets, or you want to sell books, and you want to be really nice to the people that have supported you, which, you know, on the whole I do, but I can't be the one that asks all those questions. It was funny because I've done a few events now. I think I've probably done about 10 kind of book launchy events, and I've got 2 more to go. And on my first one in Melbourne, it was really hot, and I had my favourite singer, Bob Evans, Kevin Mitchell from Jebediah, launch my book. And I said to him, I am so sorry for every question I've ever asked you about ticketing, CDs, how to download a thing, because now I'm getting
totally. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, and look, I've even had people a bit angry, like, you didn't tell me it was sold out, or why can't I get a ticket? And like, I can't service those people. So it's been interesting in kind of expectation management. But
I think it seems like a different level of expectation as well when you are a memoir writer versus when you've written kind of fiction, or, you know, authors of novels who have a sense of separation from the expectations of their fans because their personality isn't linked to the work that they've produced.
Yes.
What I find particularly interesting in your case, though, is that, you know, you have been blogging for a really long time. You've been a voice that has been very much in the public sphere for a long time. How did you know that you were ready to write a book and enter into this kind of next level of public ownership of you? Like, what made you feel like this was the moment where the book was the next logical step?
I really like that question. Well, I had been writing for a long time. I've been blogging since 2001, but on this blog since 2009. I studied at university. I'd done a Master's of Communication in majoring in journalism, and I also had written for the media for a little while. And I had just finished up at my job at the government. I'd taken, I'd taken a year's leave without pay, and I was working part-time for a disability organisation, and I made a list of everything I need to do to make money, and the book was on it, and also some much better ways to make money. So I don't make much money out of a book. And then I started reading, at that stage I had read Clementine Ford's Fight Like a Girl and Lindy Westshore and Roxane Gay's Hunger, and then I thought I really like these styles of memoir, and I didn't want it to be like a disability inspiration porn memoir. And inspiration porn is the objectification of disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. So I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted to be about me, but also some really good tips for people in feeling confident in themselves, and also like interacting with people who are different to them. So so I had a plan, and I started writing all these notes down over the Christmas holidays in 2016. In 2016, 17. And then when I got, so I didn't really write that much. It was just notes on my iPad about kind of what chapters and themes I'd like to have.
Yeah.
in the new year, when I got back to my job, it was pretty miserable. I was not happy. And I was thinking, oh no, have I made the wrong decision in quitting this safe job at the government to do this thing part-time? And I got, on the first week back, I was feeling really down, and I got these two messages, or one message actually, from a book publisher. And she said to me, oh, we're interested in publishing your book. And I thought, hang on, I haven't told anyone that I'm writing a book. What's happening? And I had just met, the year before that, or in the year before that, about 4 months prior, I went to an event at the Wheeler Centre here in Melbourne, diverse writers event, for diverse women's writers event. And I was live tweeting the event. And an agent was there, and Maxine Beneva Clark, and another writer, and Hachette, your publisher, was there as well. Oh. And so Jacinta Damase is an agent. She was talking, and after I live tweeted, she messaged me to say thank you. She said, I've been following your work for a while. Let's talk when you can. And I said, I'm going overseas next week. I'll talk to you when I get back. And that never happened. Like when I got back from overseas, it just didn't. But in the January after that, I messaged her and I said, hey, we met last year on Twitter. Well, we didn't really meet, but, we tweeted. And I've had some publisher interest. What should I do? Because I didn't want to just say, yes, I don't know anything about it. I didn't know then. And then she said, okay, I'll sign you up. So I said, okay, that was good. So she'd been following me for a while. So the lesson there was to have a public profile and to make your writing public and to share it with people so that agents and publishers find you. And so then the next week I had to do a thing for a book called 200 Women, which was by Echo Publishing, I think, or Bonnier. And so I was in that book and I had a photo shoot and an interview. And when I got there, they said, oh, we've got a publisher here that wants to talk to you about a book. I'm like, oh, another one. So I'd had two publishers interested in my work in the first 2 weeks of the year, which was a good start.
Yeah.
And then I messaged Jacinta going, there's another publisher that's interested. So she said, okay, so let's get this book. And I wrote this book proposal, and it was like writing a grant, I guess. I wrote the book proposal, and she helped me pitch it, and she signed me to Danielle Binks, who works for her agency. Danielle's a young adult writer, kind of aficionado. She's amazing. And so Danielle came with me to those publishers' meetings after the book proposal. So three publishers said no, one publisher didn't say anything, and 5 publishers said yes. So I had to
amazing.
I had to choose, and it was like choosing a puppy, because you go meet with them and they're all very nice, and about the money and what they were going to do. And anyway, so I ended up choosing HarperCollins, and then and then I started writing proper. But in hindsight, I probably should have started writing before that, because it's a lot of work.
Well, it sounds like it was kind of like a mixture of you feeling ready to commit to a book and probably feeling like you're at a point where you knew what you wanted to say to the point where you could commit it to paper in that way.
Yes.
And then also other people, having that external kind of impetus to actually do that. On that first point though, it is really different when you are committing something to a book versus committing something online. I think both of us have written memoir online. And I know that for me, putting words into physical form made it feel really permanent. And one of the things I was worried about was that people would expect me to always think whatever I wrote in my book, right? Whereas when you're writing from a point of activism, you're always changing your views because you're constantly learning more and you're hearing other people's experiences. How did you kind of navigate that or balance that? And how have you found it just navigating the whole intersection between being an activist and being yourself and your writer and representing your own views as well, not necessarily trying to represent the community? Yeah,
that's a really good question. Well, so firstly, I feel like when you're writing online, even if it's a Facebook status, there's no room to make a mistake. People are just waiting for you to trip up. And I've written about that in my book, about you're not a good actor. That's the title of the chapter. And I wrote the other day, about a month ago, I was feeling pretty worn out with the book, but also there was a lot of ichthyosis stuff in the news, and I was just a bit over it. And I posted it in one of the Facebook groups. I'm in a disability Facebook group. And there's some guy that only really talks to me to tell me that I'm doing something wrong. And he said, was the book too much for you, Carly? And I said, no, it actually wasn't. Like that's not why I was over it. Not kind of waiting to be tripped up. But then what I did find was in the book, it really gave me permission to write stuff that I couldn't write online because there wasn't enough space or time to do that. So, for example, in the book, I've written about 2 things that I hadn't really written, probably more, but maybe 3 things I hadn't really written online about. So I'd written about the trouble with travel, because when I travel, I have to take a lot of my ointments, and then that's seen as a bomb threat overseas, and just how hard it is to navigate. And I know that if I write about that, because when I write about other forms of discrimination I face, I always get the people that play devil's advocate, of course, they're going to be like that. There's no space. So that gave me space between me and the reader to do that. And I also wrote about, I took more time in writing about the difficult radio interview I had last year, because I was so mindful that I'd lose every opportunity with the ABC, which it turned out I did, certainly with ABC Melbourne, but not the wider ABC. I wrote about that, and I was asked to. I wasn't going to, but the editor said, hey, why didn't you write about this? And I chose how I was going to write about it, and I didn't have to endure the trolling and also the media. Whenever he's in the news now, I'm in the news, so I didn't have to. So far, I've had some really good experiences since I wrote that book, because the ABC, both Melbourne and RN, have asked me to talk specifically about that interview, which has been great, so I could actually have a say again. Whereas last year, when I hadn't written about it, hadn't spoken about it, aside from the initial incident, I was treading on eggshells, because I just didn't have any there again. And I also wrote about the time that I took a man to court, and I hadn't written about that online, and just that gave me the space to do that. I have written, I'll show you, I've got this book here. I have written for this book, which is Are you in that too?
No, but I'm so excited to read it.
Yeah, so that's out next month. And one of the things that I did write about a lot in there, which I have kind of written about in my book. Obviously, I mentioned the man I took to court, but I wrote about the lateral violence in the disability community. And I was really nervous about writing about that, because we just don't talk about it. And there's so much abuse that goes on to disabled people, but we don't talk about the abuse sometimes that happens
within,
And I mean, it's a rarity, but it certainly happened to me on more than one occasion, and I wrote it in there because I had safety in the other people who also wrote. So yeah, I think there was definitely that idea that there was more space.
I think that's such a really great way of explaining that, because as you were talking, I was like, yeah, you're right, there's so much that I never wrote about, because I was like, how am I meant to summarize this complex experience of identity and race in a way that a blog can convey, without having to level up to the kind of abuse that you do face online when you write about these kinds of complex issues, and B, actually keeping someone's attention for that long. And you're absolutely right that one of the benefits, which I honestly hadn't thought about until just now, is that you have, I think you said just then, it gives you that space between you and the reader. And you're so right, it gives you this opportunity to have this really intimate one-on-one connection with the reader that no one can really intrude on until they choose to take that step into the public sphere and talk about it or write about it or give you a Goodreads review or whatever it is. But in your case, I feel like that's even more it's heightened, and it's more fragile in a way, because there is a community that is connected to your work, and there is, the disabled community that is impacted by your work as well, whether that's going to be in a positive way or whether that creates, potential issues down the road when you are suffering kind of media backlash or trolling or anything like that. Did you find that difficult at all, or do you feel as if you've got kind of a system in place, or people understand what your role is as an activist versus as a writer, and when those kind of intersect?
Yeah, I'm still getting people saying, can you explain more? And I'm literally I have literally just written a book. I had a lot of people ask me for advice on things, and be it how to be a better feminist, or how to talk to your kids. And I said, there are chapters in my book. Here are the links. You can go and buy it. And that's kind of satisfied them. I had an incident. I mentioned the other day, I mentioned just before that the other day I was quite over activism and like with the book compounding.
Yeah.
And there was a story in the news in America where a woman got asked to leave a flight with her son because they both had ichthyosis, and the airline thought that they were contagious. And so I got asked to write, to comment by a couple of media outlets, and I gave an interview to the ABC, and they were great, and they were super apologetic, and they said, we know how much emotional labour this is, and that was the first time a journalist has ever acknowledged that. So that was amazing. So I gave this interview, and the article was really good, and I did mention the trouble I've had flying in America, not so much Australia, not at all Australia, but America and also Abu Dhabi, and which I detailed in the book. And anyway, and then another news outlet, a couple of other ones contacted me, and I just said, no, sorry, I've done it. I'm over it. And then one morning, a man with ichthyosis messaged me on Twitter, and he said, oh, Carly, I'm from, I don't know where, Pittsburgh in US, and can you spare a moment to do an interview with me about this case? And I said, no, sorry, but I'm sure you can find a quote on my blog somewhere. And then he said, what, you won't even spend 5 minutes with me? And I said, no, I'm actually really tired. And I said, and I do this all the time. And he said, do what all the time? Talk about ichthyosis to a person in the media? And I said, I have literally just written a book. I've given about 50 media interviews in the last 2 months. Every one of them I've mentioned ichthyosis. I said, I've been writing about this stuff for 10 years. And this was the first time he'd apparently mentioned his ichthyosis in the media. So he was all geared up for it. And then his response was to block me on Twitter. And I actually warned the people that he was doing interviews with. I don't know, hey, this guy's a jerk. You got to watch it. He just So there's that expectation to do more, that you're not doing enough. All right, he can't really buy the book in America yet because it's not out there because of the rights. But you can certainly read my blog. You can read, numerous articles I've written.
And regardless, he's not actually entitled to a response from you. I think what's interesting about that is that it kind of speaks to that notion that once you are in the public sphere, people feel this level of ownership over your time, and also this kind of indignance when you're not willing to give them exactly what they want. And I feel like that is gendered as well. I definitely feel like there's a gendered element to that, because I've had similar experiences where I've been asked to speak at an event and I've said no. And I once had a male event producer absolutely lose it at me, send me messages at midnight onwards about how could I possibly claim to care about the arts in Canberra if I couldn't find the time to do this panel. And I had to eventually write back and say, I wasn't going to say this, but I have a chronic illness, and I've only just been diagnosed. This is a couple of years ago now, and I'm just exhausted. I don't have the energy anymore to do these things. I'm in pain all the time, and I shouldn't have had to tell you that. You should have just taken my no, because when people say they don't want to do something, that's called them not giving consent. You just have to go with it.
Yeah.
But I do think that the more that you're in public, especially once you've written about yourself, people are kind of like, well, you've written about yourself, so you should be grateful for any opportunity to promote your work, and they don't have a sense of how that scale isn't all opportunities are equal. Do you have a kind of a plan in your mind or a set of limitations that you're trying to stick to as you kind of go through this process of promoting the book around how you're going to maintain your self-care? Because it's hard.
Yeah, most of the book promotion is unpaid, as you know, book tours generally unpaid, but there have been some that I've done on the book tour, like the Writers' Festival in Perth, and also another series of talks for schools that were paid, but the majority of them are unpaid. I'm probably going to slow down at the moment. It's pretty tight. So I've done the bulk of the work, which is great. But in terms of just general inquiries from the public, which is probably worse than general inquiries from the media, because at least I have an agent and a publicist to filter them. It's really hard, and it's hard setting those boundaries. I did a boundary post today, actually. I do a regular kind of, I can't take on any more work, or I did that one a couple of ago where I wrote, I'm really tired, I'm not going to take on any more work unless it's reviewing pajamas, bedding, or beds, and someone sent me pajamas. So that wasn't a fish for pajamas, but they sent me pajamas.
I love that.
But I've really had to set boundaries. There's a couple of times where people have messaged me and I haven't responded, and they got really angry, or I haven't said the right thing that they wanted to hear, And sometimes, all right, maybe it's petty of me, but I've taken their words and used it into a meme or something, like, you know, I'm not your on-call advice line. Or there's been other things where, like I wrote in the book, there was a woman who wrote to me to ask me how she should respond to someone who has a facial difference, and I didn't get back to her within 24 hours. So she said, well, that's my answer. I'm never going to look at someone with a facial difference again. I'm like, wow, I have a life.
And there's only so much you can do with like the genuine crazy people like that. But I do think that it's very particular to writing memoir and to kind of sharing your experiences the way that you have. It's this dual, you know, it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, that's what gives such power and, you know, relatability to your work, which is one of the reasons why people love to read it. And, you know, why I'm absolutely sure that your book is, you know, it's already a mega success. I have no doubt that it's going to continue to be a mega success for that reason. But the other side of that is, of course, the more that people feel like they know you, again, the more they feel entitled.
Yeah.
I wonder though, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's a real privilege, I think, to have people tell me their story, and the amount of people I've had, you know, write to me. And so it's not all bad, you know, the number of nice messages and kind messages and even seeking advice has definitely outweighed the difficult times. And one thing I have really realized is I try to make all of my events accessible, and I haven't seen that with other writers. So I think it's really important to make events accessible, be it wheelchair accessible or have Auslan there, or make sure that that there's a live stream. And I think that, you know, all writers can do that, because it increases the buying power. You know, the more writers, the more audience you have, the more books you sell. So that is something, if you're out there wanting to do memoir, or Zoya's doing more events, like, look at how to make it accessible, and there's lots of resources online. So that's been a really good thing. I've been trying to be really responsible in that, and also responding to people who are genuine and, you know, saying thank you, or sharing like their thing on Instagram, or, you know, taking the time for a selfie somewhere, and that's a real nice thing. And so it hasn't, you know, it hasn't been overwhelming, and it's been really nice to meet people, I guess fans, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, you know, at the point at which you're at right now, the exhaustion is such, and I know that I've felt this, and I imagine you feel it even more, the exhaustion is such that it all starts feeling like a lot. And I actually went through a process when I was kind of deep in that promotion. I still try and do it now. When I get the really nice messages, I screenshot them and I keep them, so that, because sometimes I look back and I'm like, this is awesome. And like, it's so nice it is a total privilege to have strangers reach out to you and say that your work moved them. And every time I got one of those messages, and every time I get one now, I still have a moment of like, oh, just like, who even am I that I get to have this, you know, wonderful experience? So I keep them all, because I think it's really easy to kind of, you get drowned in noise, and you have to kind of, like, find a moment to reflect. What I was going to ask, though, coming back to this idea that people feel like they know you, obviously we know that they don't actually, though, right? Like, because we're quite selective in what we choose to share in a memoir. How did you decide on the structure for your book, and how did you choose what you felt needed to be in it, and what, you know, maybe will be in a future book one day, but you knew now wasn't the right time?
I think because I had such a body of work, I drew on some of those pieces from my blog. So things that people might have already read. I spoke with, and I can't remember his name, John Safran. Yes, I spoke with John Safran at a media event a couple of years ago, and I told him I just got a book deal, and he was saying to me, look, you know, new readers won't have read your blog, or might not have read your blog, so include some of that stuff in it, because I wasn't sure if I could include that, and I did. I included a few pieces that I had written that had really resonated with readers, or was to the theme, and then I extended on that. So things like I wrote a letter to my unborn child a few years ago, and I put that in there, and I also put some stuff on skin hunger, and a talk I gave at Progress a few years ago at the Progress conference. So I put those things in that had already been written, but wasn't really, or hadn't been published before, but were already written. And then I wrote a lot of new stuff. So when I did the book proposal, I've written a lot of different chapters, a lot of different chapter summaries, titles and summaries. So basically it was about, growing up, going to high school and uni, and all the bits in between. But I didn't want it to be a straight memoir.
Yeah.
you know, and so I had like tips on talking to parents, like how to tell your partner you've got a chronic illness, how to like navigate work. So all those kinds of themes. And then I wrote to that theme, and then the editor said that this bit should be here and the other bit should be there. And you know, it's that the structural edit was the worst. The worst. Did you find that too?
I actually found my structural edit was pretty like straightforward, and I think I found that relatively easy in the sense that I knew that things weren't working and I just needed someone to kind of give me some advice. I found the next few rounds really hard because I hate reading the same thing again and again. And I was getting to the point where I was like, I just can't even stand looking at this anymore. I honestly could not give a crap. Like, if that comma is in the right place, can someone just make a decision for me? Like, I don't care. But what was nice was, you know, you get a couple of months window if you're lucky between the final round of edits that you do and then the book actually coming out. And so when I got my author copies, I reread the book and it felt really fresh, and I got a chance to kind of be like, oh, like I am kind of proud of this. This is
I felt
actually pretty good. Like, did you have that too?
Yeah, I just did the audiobook, and the audiobook came out last week. So I did the audiobook after it went to print, but there were some mistakes in there that I have to send back to the editor. So
oh no.
And the reprint. But they weren't like anything you could pick up. Because they weren't particularly like spelling mistakes. It was just, you know, I might have put another like a Y on part, so it became party or something. So
right, yeah,
there were a few things that were just not too many, so that's all right. But yeah, I've done a couple of other books since Say Hello, like not just mine. I did Growing Up African and then Growing and the Me Too. And the process for the editing was a lot different for those as well. I mean, it was a lot smaller scale to start with. It was just my chapter. But also I didn't really have to do much about the commas and the real meaty of editing. So with a couple of the other two books, there was a little bit more of that, like, you know, can we move this sentence around here, or this comma doesn't need to be there, or there was a lot more grammar stuff in the Me Too book, and I didn't really understand the grammar stuff. It's been so long.
There are so many things that I was like, I don't even know what the correct thing is. And I often wanted to make the uncomfortable joke, given the subject matter of my book being all about like race. I do this thing where I regularly, in a kind of like offhand way, will joke that like English is my second language, and people don't know how to deal with that. So I had to like really hold myself back from doing that to my poor copy editor.
One of the things that the editor was really worried about was whether she was allowed to make ichthyosis a non-capitalized word. And she said, would you be offended? And I said, no, that's fine. Like, just follow your style guide. So I think all the way through. And then there was something else I didn't know actually in the editing process. So when you refer to your mum and dad and say, and call them mum and dad, like mum said this, that is capitalized, like M and D. But then when you're just saying my mum is the best person in the world, that's just a small M. I didn't know that.
Isn't it funny? It's like the random things that you learn. It's also one of those things with memoir where you forget what people don't know. So I remember being surprised when my editor was like, you know, you've talked about your siblings now a bunch of times and we have no idea how old they are. Like, we just don't know how old they are in relation to you. And I was like, why does it matter? But of course, stuff like that is really important, that kind of context. One of the questions that I had for you, because we've talked about this a lot so far in the toolkits, you know, as we've kind of been working through some of the different approaches that you can have to memoir and, you know, kind of figuring out our own writing processes and things like that, we keep coming back to this idea of roadblocks, or things, whether usually conceptual things that kind of sit there when we think about writing our stories that prevent us from starting. And often it's things like the personal relationships that are going to be involved and like how you're going to kind of deal with those. But often it's also things like there are parts of your story that you haven't dealt with yet. And so you're not able to write about them, but you kind of can't write everything else until you've dealt with them. Yeah. Did you feel like you had any of those kinds of roadblocks? And did you have to had you already dealt with that as a result of your blogging, or was it stuff that you had to kind of sit down and deal with before you could actually move forward with the book?
So when I first started writing the book, or when I got the book deal, I signed up with a speaking agency that was also around the same time as my book deal. And there was a lot of tall poppy syndrome around that, and it was pretty hard. You might have seen some of it online, Zoya. It was really difficult, and I lost a lot of friends, and it was basically, I was told, you can go mainstream or you can do activism, but you can't do both. And anyway, so it was really, that was really hard. And I, you know, there were lots of people I wanted to bounce ideas off, but I just didn't have them in my life anymore because, well, you know, we ended those friendships because of that. And I don't know why. I mean, I guess it was on them, but it might have been on me too. I'm not sure. But that was really hard. And then I would have nightmares. I remember like screaming at night and my husband going, "What's wrong?" And I was just saying, you know, I'm just so scared about what people are going to think about my book. This is the community I'm writing for and they hate me. And then I remember ringing my publisher saying, "Oh, do you want the money back? Like, I'm not going to, I don't think I can do this. I think I'm going to fail everyone." So that was really hard. And then I just, yeah, I mean, I don't know how I got over it. I just did it. And I, you know, I knew I had the money, and and I knew that this book wasn't just for that particular set of the community. Yeah. But there was also, there wasn't really stuff from my childhood or adulthood that I hadn't really dealt with. But one of the there were two chapters that I just put off writing, and one of them was one on emotional labour. And I told my publisher that was emotional labour in itself, writing about emotional labour. And at the time, Nanette was on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I sent her a screenshot of Hannah Gadsby with I identify as tired, and I said, "Can I just put this in my book for my chapter on emotional labour?" And we ended up starting the chapter with that quote from Hannah. So I felt that was a lot because I just the thought of explaining it. But then today, someone tweeted me. Someone in England has bought my book, which is an amazing feat because postage is really expensive.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Thank you for buying my book, that person in England. And they tweeted my quote on emotional labour from that chapter. So I thought, oh, that makes it all worthwhile. So that was nice. And then also the other thing I found hard to write about was the radio interview, because last year I was just so fraught with all the media around that, even after the interview. So basically I did a really difficult radio interview with a person that is high profile in Melbourne, and then it made national media after people were live tweeting, and the response was amazing, but it meant that I was seen as difficult, I guess, and not invited back to the radio station. And so then I didn't want to write about it at all in the book, and my editor said, why haven't you written about it? So I had to. And I didn't want to name him because that would just give him more power. And yeah, but then afterwards, I'm really glad because I have had the chance to talk about it on 2 ABC radio stations now, at quite great length as well. Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah, so like quite a mix really of like clearly external roadblocks and other kind of tricky issues to navigate, but having that support of the publishing industry around you sounds like it did make some parts of that easy. I'm really sorry that you had that kind of awful experience from within the community though, because that's really hard. And I think it's awesome that you've pushed through that and you've actually put this book out there, because you're totally right. It's for so many more people than just one community. Which brings me to my next question, which is I love the advice sections in the book. Like, I just think it's so important to have that. And it's what really sets it apart for me from other memoir, because it just brings the reader in a different way, and it reminds people that they actually have the power to make an impact in the way that they, engage with other people, the way that they relate to other people. You've said a few times that you didn't want to write a straight memoir. Why do you think it's important to move beyond just the storytelling aspect of memoir and into that kind of advocacy space?
Well, firstly, I didn't think that I'd lived a long enough life to have, I was joking downstairs.
I relate to that.
When I was at the wrong venue, because I brought my 3 books now that I've got, Say Hello, Me Too, and the Growing Up African. And I was saying, I'm a real writer now, jokingly, because lots of people were telling me before I wasn't a real writer because I hadn't, I was only writing online.
Yeah.
But now I was told I wasn't old enough to write a memoir. So there's that as well. And so I felt that, sorry, I know I can't remember what the question was. Oh no, how do I?
The question was just, why is it important, I guess, to have that advocacy element to the book? Because I loved it. But I do think that's very much a thing right now, is not having, memoir is about so much more than just telling a story.
Yeah, I think because I have been writing so much about the advocacy stuff, and I can say, well, this is what I've been through, and this is what has worked for me, or this is what I've seen in the community. But another thing is, I think I wrote, hang on, I'm going to pour some water. I don't want it to go over the table. I thought that, so I wrote so much about the discrimination that's happened to me. And it's really hard to do that without seeming like a victim. And, you know, I didn't want to seem like a victim. I didn't want to seem like a whinger, because there was just so much of it. And when I was doing the audiobook, I was like, wow, this is really heavy. But I thought if I could offer some practical tips on how I dealt with this, or how I felt better about myself, or what people can do in those circumstances, then that was more practical than just whinging. And I didn't want it to become that kind of grief porn or pity porn, or, you know, just like no kind of practical steps, because then I would have, you know, many more 1-star reviews. So
yes, I totally understand that. And I think it is, you know, it's one of the things we've definitely talked about in Toolkit so far, is what sets memoir apart from autobiography for me is that memoir should be about using personal experience to kind of tie into a broader issue or a broader question, and kind of give society the chance to engage with the lived experiences of an individual. And I feel like your book definitely does that. I guess I had one last question. I haven't seen any audience questions come through, so somebody tell me if I've missed any. But I really just wanted to get to kind of craft and process before the public section kind of finishes. How do you fit it in? You clearly do a bunch of stuff. What practice did you use to kind of actually get the book written?
Yeah, one thing I find really weird about writing, and you probably do this too, and I'm sure other writers, like, it starts out with a blank page, and then somehow you make 90,000 words, and I don't know how that happens. You know,
it's magic.
It's magic, right? So at the start of my writing, like I said, I hadn't really written that much when I was approached by publishers. And then when I got my book deal, I was in that really hard job, and they were going to pay me quite a bit of money. And I'm like, well, that will cover me for maybe 3 or 4 months. So I quit. And then I had all this time, except I'm like, no, well, now I have to supplement my income, so I have to do all this other work. So I just made so much more work. And I probably at one stage didn't prioritize the book as much as I should have. And then when I was, this is quite a lovely story, but sad, but I was on the steps of Connie Johnson's funeral in Melbourne. So Connie Johnson was the beautiful Connie from Love Your Sister. And so I was on the steps of the funeral, of the church there for the funeral. And I met this lady in the queue, and it was really hot that day. So we were sitting under the very small awning, and she said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a writer. And she said, I'm an artist. She said, oh, come and, like, this would have been about the first 5 minutes of our conversation. She said, come and work in my studio. I have a studio just over there. And she's like, come and work. And so I did that, and I worked there for a straight kind of 6 or 7 weeks on the book. And I thought I'd done a lot on my book, but I hadn't when I got there. But then that was every day, nearly every day for 6 or 7 weeks at no cost. Like, I was there kind of, they bring in a person, like, you know, every 3 months for, you know, a residency. So I got to work there. One of the hard things that I did, or 2 hard things, I did nearly my whole book on my iPad. So once the first draft was done, no, actually, I made all these notes in my iPad, and then they turned into chapters. And then I don't know, like, for some reason I didn't sync my iPad to my Mac, so I was just emailing myself all of these different don't do that. And then I also do a lot of work in bed. So I would fall asleep a lot because I'd be bored, because you're reading or writing the same thing, you know, that you know about.
I love that. Like, well, I was working on my book and I kept falling asleep. Like,
real seller, isn't it? Yeah. So I think that I would, in hindsight, I would have a big screen on the wall and project my book to that, and then I could, like, move things around easily.
Yeah.
Probably my dream is having a big projection of a book on the wall. And then last year I started work at Melbourne Fringe. So that was 2.5 days a week. And that was perfect, except the, I don't know, structural edit, I think, was due during the festival. So
God.
So fortunately, while the festival's on, that happens for 3 weeks of the year, and I was doing, like, the whole structural edit, so the third draft then, I did this thing where we could start work at 12 instead of 10. And so I would do work from about 8 till 11 on my book, and I'd leave for work. And then, so I'd have 3 hours solid every day. So that was okay, but it was really hard. It was just really hard fitting it all in. And I actually find it hardest now, like that I need to supplement my income. And I hadn't done invoices for a long time until the other day, because I just have not had time to do them, because I have not been home for more than 4 or 5 days a week, because the rest of the time is traveling.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard. And unfortunately, my thing is my tour is extended quite a bit because of access. Can we talk about access in a minute as well?
Yeah, definitely.
So it's been extended for quite a bit, but that means it's just a long time. So I work part-time now, and it is really hard fitting it all in, because
totally.
Talks after work, or on days like today I had off, but I'm here now. So yeah, it's hard, but it's good, and I like that. I like the working with different things, but it was also one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I have a friend who's quite unwell at the moment, and I said to her, "Do you think that you'll write a book, to leave as your legacy?" And she said, "I've heard that it was really bad from you. No, I'm not spending my last months."
Oh wow.
I mean, do it. Everyone do write a book. You're on the other.
Please write a book. That's amazing though. Like, you can really get a clear sense, Carly, of how hard you've worked for this, which I think is just incredible. Let's definitely talk about access, because I'm also really curious about learning more about what we can do as writers to make our work more accessible.
And I also want to say as well, I joked before that people were saying I'm not a real writer, or I wasn't a real writer when I hadn't written a book. But I want you to know that you don't have to just write a book. You can write memoir in many ways. You can write online, on a blog, or on Facebook, or do it on YouTube, or podcasting. So you don't have to write a book as your form of memoir. And that would be my one message. Don't feel pressured, just do it when you're ready.
Yeah, totally.
And also build that audience, because that really prepared me. So as I said, I was prepared for hate and I got love, but build the audience. And then a publisher wants to see that you've got an existing audience, and a publisher wants to see that you've got followers to bring with, so they don't have the budget anymore to do all these big launches and all of that. So make sure that you have an existing audience to bring with. And I haven't seen many things that my publishers put out about me. It's been all me. So
yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah, have that audience, and don't expect the publisher to do all the work. It's like you doing the work.
Yeah, because they also only have their marketing budget for so long before they're meant to start allocating their resources to the next book or the next book. So I have seen a couple of questions just quickly come through from audience members as well. So I think we've covered most of them, but there is one, which is, are there any writers who you model your writing off, or any favorite writers who have been kind of sources of inspiration for you?
Yeah, I really like reading disabled writers' work. So I read a lot of just articles online. So Kia Brown, Elena Leary, Alice Wong. I listed a bunch of them in the back of my book, actually.
That's an awesome thing to do. That's so great.
The Disability Visibility Project. It's an archived Facebook group now, but you can go to it and have a look at it and see what articles Alice shared there. And I really like Jessica Walton's work, who's an Australian writer. I like so many. I think in terms of memoir. I said that I was reading Roxane Gay's book, and I got to see her. You saw her last week.
Yeah. We could have so many conversations about that event.
That was a bit of a shit show.
That's a shit show.
But seriously, so one of the things that they didn't cover in their amazing talk, I say that with a grimace, was disability. And I said, I didn't really have a question, but I thought, well, you haven't mentioned disability. I'm going to ask this question about disability. And I took my book and I took Growing Up African to Roxane, and I tweeted that I need to get these books somehow. And so I was live tweeting the event, and I started off with my books to saying I need to get this book. And then security wouldn't let me just put them on stage. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go and ask a question. So fortunately that question came up because I didn't really have a question other than that. And so I raced to the microphone so I wouldn't have to wait in the queue. And a couple of people said, oh, I saw you were there first. I'm like, yeah, I got no time to wait in the queue. too sore to wait in the queue. So then I asked a question, and then I said, I've got a present for you. And she said, are you Carly? I went, yes. And then my friend, or my new friend, has now videoed me talking to Roxanne and giving her the Growing Up African editor was like, not Maxine, but the co-editor Ahmed. He's like, oh my God, Roxanne Gay's got our book. So anyway, I gave her my book. So it was amazing. Anyway.
That is so great.
Yeah. So I wrote on the card to her that she was a big influence in me writing. So yeah.
Yeah. And that book is such an incredible book.
Yeah. And I also really like, listening to kind of stories on, conversations on the podcast conversations and conversations just in general, like on Death, Sex, Money on the podcast, or Hidden Brain, or all those podcasts that are kind of like involved memoir.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So not only books. Do you want to know about Access?
I do want to know about Access. I know we're meant to be running out of time, but because we started late, I feel like we could probably have an extra 5 minutes. So I'm just going to make that decision and hope that that's okay. I hope that's okay, Lucy. So yes, please.
Yeah, it's okay.
Awesome. I would love to hear about Access, and especially like any practical things that you've been doing that you think that, the rest of us could definitely take on board.
So one of the things that I have experienced is, well, in everything I do, I want to make sure it's accessible. I work as an access and inclusion coordinator for Melbourne Fringe. I write about it. I write about the importance of access. And while I don't necessarily need any access myself, except for like a blanket, or when I've been traveling, I have requested a few things, but I don't have mobility impairments, so I don't need wheelchair access. But I want to make sure that my audiences do have that access, because they are a lot of the people that read my work are disabled. So I want to make sure that they feel welcome and they feel comfortable. So one thing that I have found though is, I don't know about you, but when I go to an event, I just want to turn up and talk, and that hasn't been the case for my book tour. And the publisher has been amazing in accommodating this access or granting this access, but I don't think it had been considered until I've talked about it. So I want to make sure that publishers and bookstores especially know about access, that access isn't just about having a wheelchair accessible venue. It's about making sure there's a wheelchair accessible toilet in the venue, not halfway down the road. Having like podcasting facilities or recording so people who can't get there can listen to it. Having Auslan, having a budget for that as well. And, I'm also big on payment, and I have paid all of my people for doing the events, and I don't think that's a regular thing.
No.
And that's come out of my pocket. So I think that the publishing industry really needs to sit down and think about budgeting for access, and thinking that it's a business decision, not just a nice to have, but also the authors to think about access. Like, all of you out there listening tonight, I want you to think about who your audience is and who it could be. Because if you make your event accessible, it shows everyone's welcome, and then you're going to sell more books and people are going to talk about it. And, I had an event recently in Brisbane where not only where I saw so many wheelchair users, and the publisher who was in charge that day, the publicist, she said that she'd never seen so many people in wheelchairs, but also there were about 6 people there with ichthyosis, and that never happens. Like, that was amazing, an amazing sense of community. And, to see, like, there was a couple of little boys in the room, and one of them had a facial difference and one of them had dwarfism, and to see them playing together was really, really amazing. Not that I was focusing on their diagnosis, but just to see that diversity of community and people coming together. Also, people are really well dressed at events as well, which is really, not that that's an access issue, but they were incredible.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. That's awesome. I think that's really, really great. And I think some of those practical points are really important, because you're right. I think sometimes we focus on one aspect of access without realizing that we're just kind of marginalizing a whole bunch of other access requirements that, we can do more to think about. I think also, like, my 2 cents is, sometimes when you're a writer and you focus so much on kind of this end goal of getting published, that you feel like once you've gotten that contract, you should just be grateful for whatever you get. So if you're getting a launch organized for you, just like go with it, and I think we feel a lot of pressure to do that. But my experience certainly was that my publisher wanted me to be as happy as I could be with the events that we were having, and they wanted me to like have some agency and actually talk about the things that mattered to me. Like, I had a requirement with my book launches that I wanted to have my interviewers be other people of color, because I just think that we have better conversations in that way. And it actually allows, you know, the white people in the room to be able to listen and learn in a way that is actually deeper, because we're able to have a deeper conversation. I felt really awkward about asking for that, but it did result in just these fantastic events, and I'm really glad I did that. So I think sometimes it's important as writers that we remember that we have agency in how our work is accessed, and we do have a responsibility as well.
Yeah, I think that that's really, really great. And I've had, so far on my tour, I think I've booked 3 disabled people to talk with me, and then the rest of them have been, you know, friends and people in the media. So that's been really great. I'm in Canberra this weekend, and Ginger Gorman's in.
I know, it's going to be so great.
Huh? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
it's really awesome.
Ginger interviewed me for her book, Troll Hunting, and when she did that, I was quite sore, and we were both in the same hotel for this conference. And I said to her, I'm really sore. I'm going to go have a bath, and then when you come to my room, I'm going to be in my pajamas. And is that all right? And she said, yeah, that's fine. And she interviewed me in her pajamas. She came with her pajamas.
I've seen this photo. Is there a photo of this? I feel like I've seen that.
I think that we are going to be interviewing each other in our pajamas on Sunday.
That is amazing. Sneak peek for everyone. That is so great. All right. I do think we probably have to end the public broadcast here, because we do have another session with the Toolkits participants. But thank you, everyone who's tuned in so far. Carly, I will see you very shortly. And yeah, I'm sure if you have any questions that weren't answered tonight, you can definitely still tweet at us, and we'll do our best to answer what we can or link you to things. And thank you again so much, Carly, for joining us. That's been awesome.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys later.